Hey guys, in this Blender quick tip, I'm going to be showing you guys how to use the normal pass in the Blender render section in the compositor to create a quick lighting effect on your renders. Now, the first thing I like to say about this technique is that it doesn't bypass lighting at all. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the normals of all of the objects in this scene to try to approximate how light would react with this environment. But since it's a effect in the compositor, there's no light bounces or anything. It's just basically plastering color over the image and making it look like there's a light there. So if you use this to try to entirely light your scenes, it's going to look very flat and it's going to look unappealing. It's just going to look boring. I mean, it is good in some styles. If you're going for almost like a vintage poster maybe, or just a posterized effect, then that might work for that. But in our current case, it's not what we want. So the very first thing we're going to do is go over to the Scene tab in Blender and go down to Passes, drop down this menu and select Normal. So the first thing it does is if you look in your Blender compositor, it adds this little output right here, which says Normal very conveniently. And this right now, if we try to use it, it has no information there. We have to re-render to get that information. So we're going to close that and render it out. Now this will take a little bit under a minute just from previous tests. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and explain really quickly about this node group. So the reason this is here is just because it's some of the basic compositing effects that I usually use with some of my images. So we've got like an overlay of a vignette going on, we've got some glare, and just a couple other effects. But we're not going to be talking about these, so I want to put them in a group and get them out of the way so we don't have to worry about them. And the other thing that we're going to be keeping in consideration is this lens distortion node. Now, we're going to be using this, but we're going to make sure that the lens distortion is last. And in most of your composites, I would recommend having the lens distortion be last. Mainly because since it distorts your image, if it's not distorting all of the effects that you apply, you'll get really weird looking effects. And the same is true for this as well. So it's done rendering, so we're going to go ahead and add a vector normal node. And this will just allow us to use this normal pass. So we're going to plug that into there. And the very first thing, if you add a mix node and just plug this into the factor, is that this looks really weird. I mean, really weird. And if you rotate this around, you'll see that it is giving like a dynamic change if you change this at all. But it doesn't look right at all. In fact, this looks like crap. So if we take this and plug this directly into our composite node here, we can see what this pass is actually delivering. And the very first thing is, why would it look weird? It seems like the pass is here correctly. And if you rotate this around, you can see how we seem to be actually reacting with 3D models here, which is fantastic. But if we plug this back in, and let's try putting this to add, we're still getting this really weird effect, and you might be confused as to why. The reason is because since we're using the normal pass and we're using the normal node, Blender is just a little bit confused about what type of data this is. It's treating it like normal data, and we want it to treat it like color data. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a converter color ramp node, and we're going to drop that in there. And all this is really going to do is it's going to help Blender figure out what we want this data to actually be. So it's basically going to convert it from normal to color. We're going to put this back to mix. So we need this to sort of make it into color information, but at the same time I find that this node is very useful for adding fall off to your light, which is a realistic effect because if you look at your normal lights, right here there's this size setting, and what this does is it adjusts the light fall off. So this will sort of adjust the size of the overall light and how much it kind of bleeds around corners and stuff like that. So similarly, we can simulate this using the color ramp. First thing we're going to want to do is set this to ease, just because I find this gives a more realistic result. And then if we sort of begin to roll this around and kind of mess with it, then you'll see you get a dynamic update, and it actually looks pretty good. And you can adjust the fall off here and sort of mess with this, which gives us a lot of control, which is fantastic. So the example here is, let's say you render out a big scene. This tip is useful because if you render out a large image and you spend hours rendering it out, and then you come back the next day, let's say you rendered overnight, and you realize that you're missing a light, or you don't have a rim light, or the background's bright enough that it's blanking out your characters and now you need a rim light, then this is very useful for adding rim light or fill light or just small lighting changes that you missed before. So we're going to position this kind of like a rim light just to demonstrate what I'm saying. It can be kind of tricky to navigate this light just because it's using a trackball opposed to actually positioning a light. So as I said before, this does not replace lighting. This is kind of a emergency lighting. We're getting there. A little bit more to the right. Okay, that's pretty good. So we're going to pretend this is a rim light and that we're going to use this to fill in behind our characters. So we're going to tighten this up a little bit just because rim lights, first of all, usually have a tighter shadow size. Plus, we don't want it showing up on our background. So we'll kind of just brighten this up a little bit. That's a little bit much. About there. So now the other thing, we have a location control and a fall off control, as well as a color control, which we can adjust here. And I'm going to set this to be sort of a blue color. Set saturation to be something about 0.2, which is all great, but now we need a strength control, because right now, I mean, we could adjust the strength by selecting this white slider here and just adjusting the base color and making it more towards black, which in turn will just make its strength less. But that's, first of all, it's a workaround. It's just not very easy to do. It's kind of a pain. So we're going to add a converter math node. Now we're going to set this to multiply, and this will be a perfect strength slider. So if we put this to 0, we can have no lighting. If we turn this up, we have more lighting. So we're going to roll this, I think, a little bit higher up. Kind of wanting to nitpick this light here. Right about there. And let's set something like, I don't know, 0.2, because room lights are usually a little bit brighter. Let's tighten this up a little bit more. Change the fall off. This was a little bit smoother. That's a little bit too much. Anyway, you could fiddle around with these settings all day. Just try to get the effect that you want. But, oh, that's a little better. Anyway, so moving on. Right now, let's demonstrate that issue I was talking about previously, where we have all of our compositing effects going through this filter here. Then this is plugged into the top one, and then that's plugged in there. So the first thing is, for some reason, it's disappeared. Oh, I see why. Unplug that. So now if you look at this, do you see how the light is not matching up with the edge of the Goomba? It's like wrapping around weird. And if you had a stronger distortion value on this node here, then you would see that even more. I mean, that's just weird. It's like a ghost effect, which I guess could be cool if you're going for like ghost Goombas. But that's not what we want here. So what we're going to do here is you want to make sure to have your lens distortion last. Then just going to plug that back into there and turn off fit. So this is really about it. We have here our location, our fall off, and our strength, and our color. That's really all we need to add another light. So the one thing is that I would turn this into a custom group like this and sort of expose all the values that we want. But currently, as far as I'm aware in Blender, you cannot, inside of a group, either reveal the slider or this sort of normal trackball here, which is unfortunate, and I hope we get a feature to fix that soon, but this is what we have to work with currently. You could still put this all inside a group and then go inside the group and adjust it, but I think keeping them all exposed would just be simpler. And that's really about it. I hope you enjoyed this quick tip, and if you enjoyed these Goombas and like the models, I will be linking the model and rig below the video so you can download and mess around with them yourself. Happy blending!